Information about your hometown and surrounding area. Tiger Talk is brought to you by delicious homemade goodness and Perry's Floors and more. And good morning at 8:07. Welcome to Tiger Talk here in your hometown radio station, brought to you by Hancock's Neighborhood Market and Perry's Floors and more. And it's the first Tuesday of the month, and that means Richard Nelson. Why do I say Green?
I don't know.
Why do I do that?
That's okay. Hey, it's a holiday week, so we're kind of relaxed.
I know it's
and
Richard
loose and
Nelson, like I know my own name, and I said Green. That's so.
In either case, I'm here, and Ty, it's great to be on the program with you.
Well, it's great to have you. Richard Nelson is the director of the Commonwealth Policy Center, and he's been here for several months now, the first Tuesday of the month. So mark your calendars if you enjoy what you're hearing, and we certainly are glad to have Richard here in studio. So welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here, and for the listeners just tuning in, the Commonwealth Policy Center is a nonprofit public policy group, nonpartisan group, essentially working for biblical values in our culture, working to bring a moral compass back into the conversations of the day, and encouraging people to be aware of what's going on and then to engage in the appropriate way. Ty, we were just talking before we got on the mics here about the importance of civility, the importance of treating others with kindness, and just being careful how we talk, because there's a ton of difficult issues to talk about.
Yeah.
And you know what? We've all got strong opinions on them.
Sure.
But if we can engage these issues and have discussions on these issues with a tempered spirit, and by being gracious to one another and trying to listen to the other person and understand what they're saying, that goes a long way. And it's something that we really need in our society today.
No doubt about it. In fact, my guest yesterday, gentlemen, we're going to read the Declaration of Independence downtown tomorrow. Yeah. And, our country was founded on some pretty tough things, pretty tough subjects, pretty tough principles, and they didn't agree. A lot of those folks disagreed, but they came together for a common good, a common purpose, but they at least listened to the other side. So that's one thing that we stress here is that, the opinions that are expressed on the show when you're here are not necessarily the opinions of this station, any ownership or management or anything like that. But, if you hear something that you don't hold with, so to speak, it's not your thing, then, there are groups and opportunities to come out here and express their side as well.
That's right. And that's, the beauty of our country is that we have this great freedom of speech. We've got outlets like this, WPKY. We've got the public arena you just mentioned. I think on the town square you're going to be reading the Declaration, or there'll be a reading there. I love the freedom that we have in this country, just to be able to get out in public and to share and to dialogue and to get into the tough issues, and even to criticize our government. When our government's not doing well and when they need to be turned in a different direction, we need to say something. Sure. And this is part of our civic responsibility. As good citizens, we need to shape the debates, to let our opinions be known to our elected officials. And if we don't, who's there to hold the government in check? And here on this Independence Day holiday, or on the eve of it, it's really good for us to talk about civics and citizenship and our responsibility to influence our government. And really that's what we're celebrating on July 4th tomorrow. Independence Day is where, we had 56 patriots in this country who came together and put together one of the greatest, if not the greatest, political documents in all of history, this Declaration of Independence. And they talked about things like self-evident truths, and they talked about government by the consent of the governed, and they talked about being endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Just beautiful things. We don't, as Nicolas Cage said in the movie National Treasure, after he's reading a couple lines out of it, he said, people don't talk like that anymore. And we don't, but it's a beautiful, beautiful things that they capture there, and we've got a lot to celebrate this Independence Day holiday.
We certainly do, Richard, and would encourage everyone that maybe have not heard the words, or never maybe have read it, or it's been since 8th grade history, to head down to Planters Pavilion tomorrow in downtown Princeton, and it's about 10 o'clock, rain or shine, and just listen to those words, because, as you say, 56 patriots, as you said, put their name on a document, and really, it was a treasonous act at the time.
It was, in fact, they knew what they were doing. If the king caught them, if the king's troops caught them, they would be hung and quartered. They would have their property seized, their homes wrecked. They laid it all on the line, which is something that most of us can't relate to. Benjamin Franklin said something very famously after they had all signed. He talked about them all being in the same boat together. He said, "Look, we all need to hang together, or we're going to hang separately." Right?
That's right.
And so they did. They hung together, and they fought for this great cause, even though they had probably secondary opinions that were a little different, and probably attended different churches and had some little different political philosophies. But on the essentials, they were together. They understood that freedom is important. They understood that the king was acting like a tyrant and infringing on their freedoms. So in the Declaration of Independence, they listed 27 separate abuses. And they didn't just happen over 1 or 2 years, but they went back a whole decade to the Stamp Act that was unjustly instituted. And that was eventually repealed. But then they listed some other things, like soldiers being quartered in their homes without the permissions of people. That was a violation of somebody's personal privacy and their property rights. They looked at the suspension of courts. The king arbitrarily suspended their courts that were supposed to mete out justice. The king also was seizing ships, American ships coming into port, arbitrarily seizing them, and then interrogating the captains and going through the cargo. So there were 27 different abuses that they had outlined. And I want to, if I can pull this up quick enough, I just want to read a couple of the first paragraphs
I think we should.
of the Declaration. And,
sure.
and this is something that it's good for us, I think, every Independence Day to be reminded of. And it begins like this. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entails them, entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Then Jefferson goes on in the Declaration to list 27 separate violations of natural rights and of their freedoms that they've enjoyed as colonists. And then he closes by this. I think I'm going to read just a couple of the closing statements. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. And then he goes on to explaining their appeals to justice and how they have deferred to the king. And then they go on to say this: we therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, and they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of the Declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And then below that, you'll see the signatures of the signers. And of course, the most famous of those is John Hancock, front and center, the largest signature. And you know why he had it so large?
He wanted to make sure the king saw it.
He did. Apparently the king had bad eyesight, and he said, I want King George to know that John Hancock has signed this. And they were not afraid. They knew what they were doing. They were very sober in what they did by crafting the Declaration, but they knew the consequences if they were caught or if their effort failed. Each of them would have been hung as traitors to Great Britain.
In fact, I was reading a little bit more after that. I think the signers weren't revealed until sometime in August, I think, just for their safety and after kind of the dust settled.
That's right.
But I myself signed it in 1978. My grandmother had and it's still hanging in my house. I've got this beautiful, large Declaration of Independence that's been hanging in my family's home for probably 40-some years, but I did sign it in 1978 and got a tremendous spanking because of it. But
I thought this was a show of your patriotism or something.
It really was. I mean, I felt like, hey, I needed to sign that thing. I always I was always fascinated with the document. I mean, it's been in my house. It's that important, though. It's important when you see that. You saw all that cool writing of all those guys, but there's something about it, and as we discussed with my guest yesterday, Mr. Robert Ward, there's no doubt that it was divinely developed, and some of the greatest thinkers of this nation, of the time, it came out of their minds, and it changed the course of world history.
It did. One of the fascinating things about the Declaration of Independence is that they acknowledge natural human rights, that there's something above government that gives us our rights, and they refer to the Creator. In fact, God is referred to 5 different times in the Declaration of Independence. But that phrase, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the phrase that captures the imaginations of people all around the world. It's something that we know, I think, instinctively. We know that we're not just cosmic accidents. We know that human beings are special, and we know that we have endowed human rights that come from God. And it was really a miracle that we had these political leaders that came together to say, you know what, government is not the highest authority. King George, I understand that you're the king, and England has believed in this divine right of kings for centuries, but you know what? You have been a tyrant. You have usurped our rights. You have trampled human rights of these people. And we've tried to address this. We've been patient with you, but we're just going to say, we're going to separate. We have been independent, self-governing colonies for a couple hundred years, going back to the early 1600s, almost a couple hundred years. And the king had overstepped, and they said, we're just going to separate and assume self-rule. Now, England could have, and the king could have said, we're going to let them on their own. Now, instead, they chose to send more troops here.
Yeah.
In fact, we were at war. People don't realize this. We were at war with England for a year before the Declaration was signed.
That's right.
I mean, the shot heard around the world was fired in 1775. British troops were going to seize the armories in Massachusetts. They were going to take the weapons and the ammunition, which would render the colonists vulnerable to anything, not just to the British, but to attacks from Indians and from other people as well. So that's, by the way, why the Second Amendment is so important. That's part of our political DNA, to the right of self-defense, and that the government should not disarm its people. But the founders came together, and they put together this beautiful document acknowledging these eternal truths, these beautiful truths that acknowledge there's a God who endows with rights and with liberties, this idea that government is tempered, government cannot do whatever it wants to do. At a certain point, if government becomes a villain and becomes tyrannous, then it's the right of the people to alter and abolish the government. And it sounds pretty radical to our ears because we've grown up and lived in peace and in safety, and a government that's been friendly to freedom, a government that upholds human rights, a government that operates under the rule of law. But you know, Ty, this is not the history of most of the world.
No, it's
and
not.
It's not the condition of most of the world right now. If you're to travel and see other countries, you'd find that the governments are corrupt, that they're tyrannous, that they violate human rights, and you don't have to go very far, even in this hemisphere. You go into some of the Caribbean nations. My daughter and I were in Haiti last year, and it's a corrupt government. It's a government that does not uphold the rule of law. If you look in South America, you look in Venezuela, it's corrupt. They don't uphold human rights there. So in America, we're blessed. We're very different than much of the world, and it's something that we should treasure and be very grateful of and celebrate.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. What do you tell people that there's a lot? There seems to be a lot of division out there these days. What would you tell folks that say, you know what, I don't see America being the same. I don't see it being that shining light on the hill in days past. I mean, there's a lot of divisiveness in this country right now, and it seems to be partisan, always this party, that party. But what do you tell folks? I mean, it's still, in my mind, the greatest country in the world. Yes, we have our issues, we have our troubles, we have our differences, but America, the United States of America, is still different than everybody else.
Yeah, we still,
and it's really the foundation of this document, our Bill of Rights, and those other things that come along with our form of government, which is a republic. You know, people say it's a democracy, but it is a republic.
Yeah, that's right. A republic is different than a democracy. And actually, that's what Benjamin Franklin said after the Constitutional Convention, and they enacted the Constitution, and they became the United States of America. That was in 1787. A lady outside Constitutional Hall, or Independence Hall, said, "Well, what do we have?" And
exactly.
Franklin replied, "A republic if you can keep it."
You can keep it. That's right.
And part of the formula and what our founding fathers understood is that freedom was only possible when people had an internal moral compass. John Adams was speaking to the Massachusetts militia, I believe it was 1798, and he said, "Our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." And so we need to have a moral compass. There needs to be an understanding that we are not our own gods. We are limited. We are moral agents, and we need to act that way in civil society. And to get back to your suggestion, though, an observation, really, that many people have don't see America as that shining city on a hill, and they might want to criticize us for our past, for our failures. Even the founding fathers, let's be frank, they were imperfect men, and at the time when the Constitution was created, they acknowledged slavery. That is the great original sin.
Sure.
Which is sad, because here we're talking about these great things that these men did and the great documents they put together. And yet slavery was allowed to continue, and that was one of the compromises they made, because the southern colonies would not join in union. They would not join the United States unless slavery was legitimized. And part of me thinks, actually a large part, thinks it'd be better off just to form the country as a free country right from the beginning. If we're going to hold those truths in the Declaration to be self-evident, they're all are created equal, well, slavery shouldn't be part of that political formula. But that's the past, and we can't change it. That has been rectified through the Civil War and through the Civil Rights movement of the 60s. But for those that want to pick at our failures, yes, we do have failures. Yes, we do have sins in our past. There are even injustices today. But that does not undermine the truths that were written in the Declaration and in our Constitution. It does not undermine the fact that government is tempered, the central truth that we have human rights that government should uphold. And the Declaration says the purpose of governments is to secure our inalienable rights. It doesn't undermine that. So despite our failures, despite even what's going on today with all the tough issues, we have incredible freedom. And the question is, Ty, are we using this freedom for good?
For good, yeah.
Are we using this to help our country along? Are we going to roll up our sleeves and get into the heavy work, heavy lifting of being good citizens, of shaping this country and moving it in a better direction? Or do we sit back? Do we criticize? Do we point fingers? I mean, there's two choices before us. I'd rather be proactive. I'd rather roll my sleeves up and get into the arena and work for good. There's something else that motivates me too. As being a follower of Jesus, he calls his people to be salt and to be light. He calls Christians to be gracious, to be compassionate, to where there's hurting and pain, to bring healing and compassion. Where there's brokenness and turmoil, to come in as a fixer, as a peacemaker. And there's many opportunities as we look at a broken culture, as we look at turmoil in our culture. We've got many opportunities. Those who identify as being followers of Jesus have many opportunities to engage and to influence and to work for the betterment of our society.
No doubt about it. And Richard, we're halfway through the hour here, so let's take a break and collect our thoughts. I mean, a lot of heavy, good stuff, and there's more to come. I know we've got lots of, this. It's always nice this time of year. It's hot. It's summertime. Kids are out of school, but we can be reminded each and every year just how important the founding. I think our country is 242 years.
Yeah.
This year.
Yeah.
Young and relatively speaking, compared to other European countries and what a wonderful. It's still an experiment. It's dynamic. We're still experimenting and growing and figuring out who we are, even after 242 years. It's a pretty awesome thing.
That is. It is. And even with that said, so we are young. We're still learning. Every generation has to find its identity and has to participate in leadership in this country. At the same time, we have the oldest country as far as being under the original Constitution. The oldest governing document of any country. Now, many countries have constitutions even similar to ours, but they've changed over the years. Some are new, some might be 50 or 100 years old. Ours is the Declaration of Independence is 242 years old. Right. Constitution's a little younger than that. But still, we've had this incredible stability over a pretty long period of time. Yet it's short in the big scheme of things, and when you look at world history. We're blessed. We've had this stability, and yet there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's 8:30. We're going to take a break here, halfway point here on Tiger Talk. Richard Nelson is here. He is the director of the Commonwealth Policy Center. We're having a great conversation about America, really. It's the eve of our Independence Day celebration. A lot of good things to talk about, and we hope you'll come back and join us here on Tiger Talk at 8:30. We'll be back on WPKY, The Tiger. Hancock's Neighborhood Market on Commerce Street in Cadiz is the place to shop for delicious homemade goodness. Hancock's makes their own fresh chicken salad, pimento cheese, salads, and a variety of mouth-watering desserts, sure to please your entire family. While at Hancock's, be sure to visit their meat department for the best selection of USDA choice meats in the area. Hancock's Neighborhood Market in Cadiz, hometown, homemade goodness, and the Hancock name you know and trust for quality for your family. Hancock's Neighborhood Market on Commerce Street in Cadiz.
Since 1978, Perry's Floors and More has been selling, installing, and servicing homeowners throughout Western Kentucky with quality flooring and workmanship. Perry's Floors and More carries luxury vinyl plank and luxury vinyl tile, carpet, window treatments, and more. Quality brands like Mannington, Shaw, Tarkett, Beaulieu, and Flexitech. There is a reason why we say you can walk on our reputation. Come see Bill and Lucy at 127 West Market Street or call 270-365-9869.
All right, we are back at 8:31, Tying a Brown Tiger Talk. Our guest is Richard Nelson, Director of the Commonwealth Policy Center, and we're just having a tremendous conversation here about Independence Day, our Declaration of Independence, and our country and the Founding Fathers.
Yeah, and this is a talk, Ty, that I love to have, just about our history. I'm a kind of a history geek. I love America. I am a student of history. I read the Constitution and the Declaration actually over and over, and I so appreciate the freedoms that we have. So appreciate what we're given in this country, and this is something I've dedicated my life to preserving, the American liberty and American freedom, and of course that's part of what I've dedicated my life to, and then also engaging the public arena from a biblical worldview, encouraging Christians to be involved, to have an influence, a positive influence in society, to point others to Jesus. We were talking just a few minutes ago about, being light in the culture, having an influence in the culture, and then the miracle really that birthed this country. So I already mentioned that in the Declaration, God is referred to on 5 different occasions, where they rely, firm reliance on divine providence, the Creator endowing us with rights. He's acknowledged over and over. And one of the beautiful things in this country is that our founding fathers acknowledged a God, and they came from different backgrounds. There were some Anglican, there were some Congregationalists, there were Presbyterians, there were Catholic. They were across the spectrum. But they had this view that there was a Creator who is governing in the affairs of men. But this Creator has a place in a political document, and that was a miracle, first of all, in itself. But then secondly, they acknowledged the Creator with these divine rights, this divine place in society. They did that without imposing a national religion or forcing us all to believe the same way. It was a truth that they acknowledged there, without establishing a religion. And of course, 11 years later, we got the Constitution. A few years after that, we got the Bill of Rights, which gave us the First Amendment that protects freedom of religion, where Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And this is one of the beautiful things that the founders did. God is part of our political fabric, yet they didn't establish a religion. I wrote a little bit about this yesterday. I wrote a column about the Declaration of Independence is worth celebrating, and how we have we've been blessed. We have been given a moral compass. God has been acknowledged in that founding political document, and yet in recent decades, we have strayed away from that. And it's interestingly enough, it's through the one branch of government that one of our founding fathers said should be the least powerful and the least threat to American freedom and liberty. And it's the Supreme Court. It's the federal courts. So if you go back to the 1960s, late 60s, there were major rulings that limited or abolished prayer in public schools or the teaching of the Bible in public schools. And it was just a few years after that we saw, in 1973, the Roe v. Wade ruling, which struck down every state law that was that prohibited abortion or restricted abortion. And then we saw rulings that limited the 10 Commandments in public places. And by the way, that was a Kentucky case, the Stone v. Graham case, that where our legislature said you can post the 10 Commandments in public schools as long as it's done by private funds.
What year was that?
That was in 1980.
That's what I was thinking, because I moved here about that time, and in every classroom they were there.
And that was the legislature said, look, we're going to put the 10 Commandments. They need to be in the classrooms, but we're going to do it with public funds. And that was struck down by the courts. Then we saw 10 years later the Santa Fe v. Doe ruling, which struck down student-led prayer in public schools. This was a Santa Fe, Texas public school where students were leading prayers over the loudspeakers before football games and basketball games, and the court said, no, you can't do that. And then we saw the Obergefell ruling just 3 years ago, where every state law that defined marriage, and every state, by the way, had marriage laws. But you had just 5, think about this, 5 people on the U.S. Supreme Court that said, nope, all those state legislatures are wrong. All those state constitutions that were recently enacted, they're wrong. All the people, some 60 million votes that were in favor of man-woman marriage, the court said, you're all wrong. And they undid that. They acted like a super legislature and imposed their will on the people. So we've seen this country turn in the last several decades through these rulings that have really, number one, they've undermined the democratic process, but the moral equation has been taken out. This idea that there's a creator who gives us moral boundaries, a creator who is the reference point for right and wrong. And it's interestingly enough that this started through the prayer and the Bible reading and the Ten Commandments cases that the courts struck down, which you can say that once that has been taken out of the way, then other secular policies came into place. Yeah. So this is one of the challenges I think that we face today, Ty. How do we, in a postmodern culture, a culture that's moving towards secularism, how do we address this? Well, we've talked about it a number of times already this morning. We don't just throw our hands up and say there's nothing I can do. We need to engage. We need to be aware of what's going on. We need to join the conversations. We need to get involved politically, find those leaders who understand American ideals, American values, and that will fight for those once they're in office, help to get them into office, to vote for them, to help on their campaigns. Maybe some people are listening right now that feel led to run for office. By the way, this is something that the Commonwealth Policy Center does.
You all do that.
We train candidates how to run. In fact, we've got a DVD on our website from a training earlier this year that shows candidates how to run for office.
You put on seminars from time to time as well, don't you?
We do. We have state conferences and seminars, and not just on candidate training, but on different topics like religious freedom and other topics as well. So this whole business of citizenship, it's not for somebody else to do. It's for all of us, whether it's voting or running for office ourselves or helping somebody to get elected. Citizenship is a full-time job.
What kind of analysis did you all do after our primary election? I think statewide, 23.45% roughly voter turnout. I mean, what does the Commonwealth Policy Center see there? Is it just apathy? Is it apathetic thinking? I mean, does it think, oh, my vote doesn't count? I mean, what's going on there? Yeah,
good question. I was disheartened when I saw those numbers. It was actually lower than what the Secretary of State had projected.
Those were the numbers I think that Allison Lundergan, that final, I think 23.45,
somewhere around there. That's right. She was projecting higher numbers before the election, close to 30%. Didn't happen.
No.
So that low voter turnout is unfortunate. It saddens me when I see so many, 3 out of 4 voters or more that stay at home and they didn't bother to get out and vote. Here's another observation too. So for the benefit of the voters and for that whole statewide average, I was just looking at the numbers the other day, and some counties had 50, 60% turnout. And it was based on the races that were there. If they had hotly contested races, often a state house race or a state senate race, or a judge executive race where and of course this is the primary election, but where it was 2 good candidates, they were both running hard and advertising and getting out there, that will rev up the base. That will get people to come out to vote. Now, not all counties had that. So you had some counties that there were few challengers. You might have had just a couple of races on the ballot, and maybe those candidates weren't working hard. Maybe they weren't advertising. And I would guess that there are probably some people that didn't even know there was a primary. Actually, a lot of people weren't aware that there was a primary in some counties. So the voter turnout did vary county by county. Many counties did have high, 50% or higher turnout. A lot of counties, though, didn't. Statewide average 23.5%, which is unfortunate. My belief is that whenever there's an election and there are people on the ballot, we need to get out there and vote. Whether it's the dog catcher or the mayor in your city, we need to get out there and vote.
Sure, because that's one of those things that these gentlemen here, I mean, that's part of what we do as Americans, whether it's a local race, whether it's a state race, whether it's a federal race, is to get out there and pull the lever. Well, shove the paper now, into the slot. But it is disheartening, and I don't know if there is. You might have nailed it there with certain interest and people being aware of candidates or that races are even going on, or primaries even going on. But boy, I tell you, I don't know, it just seems like people just don't care anymore. I'm not going to go do that.
And they can't. And for those of you tuned in right now, I know you care because you're listening to this conversation that some people might think is boring, but you care about Kentucky. You care about citizenship. You care about this country. Let me encourage you to nudge your friends, nudge your family members who might not care as much. They might not take the freedom to vote that we're talking about. They might not take that as seriously as you do. We need to nudge them, and we need to impress upon them that, hey, this freedom was bought with a price.
And November's important coming up here.
It's a very important election year.
Very important, yes.
Every state House member, half of the state Senate members, all of the congressional delegation will be on the ballot in Kentucky this year. Hey, by the way, Commonwealth Policy Center has resources for voters. We will have voter guides for every single one of the races that I just mentioned, and they'll be available probably in September sometime. If you go to CommonwealthPolicyCenter.org, CommonwealthPolicyCenter.org, you'll be able to find the voter guides there. And again, it'll be sometime in September. Also, in the meantime, if you'd like to get our email updates, we'd be happy to send you our. We've got an email update that comes out twice a month. You can sign up on the front page of our website, CommonwealthPolicyCenter.org.
Yeah, it's pretty easy, and you can just say receive updates and just give them your email address, and you're right there. And it's good. It's good information, and whether you're maybe like, well, I'm not so sure how I think about issues. It's always good to check different sources and hear different sides, different opinions and things. But the Commonwealth Policy Center is definitely keeping people informed here in the Commonwealth.
That's right. So here's the reason why you should vote. Getting back to that, of course, it's a freedom that was bought with a price. But if you were in California right now and maybe been on the sidelines regarding voting or being involved politically, there's a bill going through the legislature that would ban certain books or literature that would speak of an Orthodox Christian view of human sexuality. There's an attempt there in California to shut down speech that says that those in the LGBT community can change. And I guess that's become a political orthodoxy to say that if you're born that way, you need to stay that way. But there are some very good books, thoughtful books written in a respectful way that speak of this issue, LGBT issues, done with a way. But those legislators in California are saying, no, we think this is hateful speech. We think that this shouldn't be welcomed here. And believe it or not, there's a bill that would ban certain kinds of the books, the sale or distribution of books that would change or would challenge those in the LGBT community. And just that it would go through the legislative process and make it as far as it has should be shocking enough, because this is a First Amendment freedom that we have. Freedom of speech, the freedom of press. And, these books aren't inciting violence. They're not demeaning or devaluing, although some people might see it otherwise. They're really not. They're simply sharing a different perspective on a really important issue, a hotly contested issue. So if we care about things like the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, we need to be involved politically. Ty, you have a radio station here, and this is a gift that you have to be able to talk freely over the airwaves. And I know that you're politically active, and I hope that everybody who appreciates this radio station is politically active, because there are attempts to shut down free speech or certain kinds of speech. And, freedom is something that, as we've said, it was bought with a price, and it needs to be defended year after year, election after election. And if we care about it, we need to be willing to preserve it.
Certainly. few things have happened and changed since you've been here, since I guess it was June, beginning of June.
Yeah.
Anything Kentucky statewide, things in Frankfort. Governor Bevin, I do believe, had to repeal. It left me. Heard it on the news this morning.
It's the Medicaid.
Yeah. And it's left a lot of people, without coverage, mainly for prescription drugs. I think and maybe things such as that. But there's all kinds of issues and budgetary concerns in Frankfort.
So Governor Bevin, about a year and a half ago, got a waiver from the federal government regarding Medicaid, and the governor is trying to reform Medicaid. And for those who are able to work, if they are between the ages of 18 to 59, if they're able-bodied, if they are not the primary giver of a parent or of a child or somebody who has special needs, if they're able to work or go to school, he's saying you need to do that. And the idea is to help them to step up, to help them to move on, to not just be trapped in the system. So if it would require them to work 20 hours a week, to go to school, or to volunteer in their community. It also requires them to pay a very minimal premium, $1 to $20 a month, just something to pay towards it. I happen to believe these are good things. Some people disagree. But this is something the governor's trying to do to help people, again, move in a different direction, to help them towards independency instead of dependency. A federal judge struck this down and said this is unconstitutional. You can't do it. And the governor warned that if this happens, he would be forced to take some people off of Medicaid. And I didn't really understand that. I was in touch with the governor's communication director yesterday asking about this. But as I understand, I'm still waiting for some more details, but as I understand it, because of that waiver that was applied for, and because of the obligation, Kentucky right now has an incredible monetary obligation because the Medicaid rolls have been opened up. Under Governor Steve Beshear, he opened it up to people who are working and increased the income threshold so more people could get on it. But what that did is it created a greater financial burden to the state. Under that Medicaid waiver, there was a way for the government, for the Kentucky government, to pay for it as people were moving towards independency. But when that was struck down, it actually left Kentucky with more obligation, and the governor said, we can't afford it.
Right, it's a deficit situation.
Yes. Yeah. So those who were receiving eye care, dental care, that is being cut. Now, that's in limbo.
And that's Medicaid.
That's the Medicaid.
Yeah, yes.
This is for those who are poor and cannot afford health insurance. Yeah. Now, I'm still waiting for more of the details. I think it's still cloudy as to how this applies or when it goes into effect.
When it will shake out and everything, yeah.
So, but here's the bottom line, or as I see it. We've got a choice before us. If we look at this in big picture terms, do we want more government? Do we want more people to become dependent on government? Do we want, or do we want something else? A little less government, a little more independency for people out there, a little more opportunity for people. And I think those are the two paths that that's what the governor sees, and he's trying to move people towards on a different path.
Right.
And I think that's a respectful thing. A lot of the news media is spinning this as, well, the governor's hard-hearted, he doesn't care about the poor, he's just letting them out to dry. I don't think that's the case. And I think in the end, I don't think people are going to be left out in the cold on this, but we'll see. We'll stay tuned, and the facts are going to unfold. It is unfortunate though that a judge has stepped in. One judge has stepped in and said, "No, Governor, you don't know. We know better. You got to keep everybody in." Here's another thing too. Government only has so many resources, and Ty, these resources come from your back pocket and from mine and all the listeners out there. And at a certain point, if we want to maintain, our own fiscal houses, if we want to create wealth for ourselves, at a certain point it becomes burdensome, and we say, no, government, you got enough. We need to do something different. The kind of government we have, this democratic republic, this free market capitalism, allows us to pursue our own calling in life. It allows us to accumulate wealth, to provide for our families, to participate in our communities. And it draws a line with government that says, so much but no more. Here you can go this far but no more. When you cross that line, you have a different form of government. You have a different economic system, and we see in the world how that's working out. If you want something where there's socialism, full-blown socialism, where the government's doing everything, take a look at Cuba, or take a look at Venezuela, or North Korea, or any host of countries where they have socialistic policies, and that is not our form of government. As good as it sounds to help people, as kind-hearted as we are as American people, we need to realize that the burden is not on the government. It's not for the government to create these programs and to pick and to choose. It's more on each of us as individuals, and it's each of us in our communities to help. And I'm thinking here in Princeton, as I look around or as I think of the ministries here, you have a lot of good ministries. You've got many churches that are helping, clothing closets and food banks.
Sure.
You have a ministry downtown, HR Ministries. Harold Riley there was a clothing closet there. They're ministering to people in their various needs. There's a jail ministry there.
And I do want to remind folks, I want to give a plug for Feeding America. Several churches have teamed with them. 10 pallets today of vegetables and fruits out at Cash Express beginning at 10 o'clock. So those in need, if you're hearing this, get out there and get some vegetables. It'll be there till it lasts, till it goes away. But that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. I think of some of the businesses. First Southern National Bank sows back into the community. They're community-oriented. And one of the things, when you have community-oriented ministries or businesses that are helping out, one of the things that comes with that, as opposed to just a government program, is you have real people with compassion. They're motivated by other things that would cause them to minister and to reach out and to help those who need help. And that's something that is missing from every single government policy. As much as the help might be and as big as the resources might be, compassion is missing. When you just give a check or just put a roof over somebody's head without that personal connection, without somebody who takes a real interest in that person's life, I don't know if that person is being, in fact, I know they're not being fully helped to the degree to which they need to be helped.
Right. Yeah, and you see, especially in small rural America, but even in large urban communities, there are places that are reaching out and giving that compassion and that helping hand to those that are in need. And hopefully we'll see more and more of that go away from government and more in our churches, in our community groups, in our civic groups.
Alexis de Tocqueville came to this country, a Frenchman, historian, came here in the 1830s to find what America was about. He saw that America was prospering. I mean, we were this young country that was growing very quickly and very, very prosperous. And he came here to try to figure out what was going on. And one of the observations was that he found these intermediary institutions. He saw churches. He saw these different civic groups, and they were meeting needs in different areas. And it happened because of this great freedom that people have. He compared that with Europe. When European nations had a need, some kind of a societal need or individual need, they would go to the government. They would get a bill passed, or the government would get involved. And he compared and contrasted these two different models in his book, Democracy in America. And it's fascinating because we still have that model, by and large, today. And an incredible number of groups that can get involved. And it tells us that, government isn't the only group, even though we do have a safety net and there are certain programs to help the poor and to keep people from falling through. I think the greater way to influence a society are the intermediary institutions. I'm thinking of, I don't know if you were going to say something.
Well, I was looking at, Ronald Reagan had a famous quote. Couldn't think of what it was, so I was going to look it up because you can look up anything, but it had something to do with the government and helping people. Yeah. And I forget how it was phrased, but it's basically, you can't look to the government to help people. I mean, yes, it helps people, but it takes people helping other people.
It does. So let me try to put a real life situation or put some flesh on these bones that we're talking about. A pastor friend of mine in Hopkinsville and I do a radio program every Wednesday, WNKJ on the front porch, and there was a homeless guy that he got to know. He saw him sleeping in the park and started a conversation, learned that he had not been in a home for 30 days. And so he kind of took him under his wings and helped him out. Got him cleaned up, got him some food. Come to find out, this guy actually was receiving Social Security, but he had a caretaker. The check was coming in every month. He had a place to stay, but this other person wasn't looking out for him, wasn't really caring for his needs. And this other real person that got involved with this other person that needed help was able to help steer him, to take him under his wings, and just did a number of things. So the check was there, the home was there. There was even somebody nominally involved with his life, but didn't take that deep interest in him. And if we're gonna solve issues like homelessness, if we're gonna solve issues like the opioid epidemic, if we're gonna solve the issue of foster care, all the kids in foster care, then we need to take an interest in other people's lives and minister. And this might look differently to different people. It might mean writing a check. It might mean volunteering your time in an agency. It might mean bringing somebody to church. It might mean bringing somebody a meal. And this, by the way, is going to challenge us because we've got to get out of our comfort zones. We live very, very comfortable lives, and we're in a comfort zone. When you get involved with somebody else's life, it's messy. Why is it messy? Well, because people are messy. But they need us. People need us, whether it's that homeless person or whether it's that child that does not have a home to go to, or parents that are taking care of them. We need to roll up our sleeves and get involved. If we want our society to turn in a better direction, if we want to be a healthier society, then it comes down to each of us, not the government. Now, the government secures our freedoms, and we have the freedom to do this, but don't depend on the government to do it. Don't depend on the government program to do it. It comes to each of us as good citizens to do this.
Well, and I guess the quote I was thinking of came from his inauguration, January 20th, 1981, but I couldn't remember the context it was in. But in this present crisis, Ronald Reagan said, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
That was the statement that I thought, too.
And maybe that's what I was thinking, but I thought there was maybe something else. But that a lot of times is the case.
Yeah. It's interesting, Ronald Reagan was a political outsider. He did not come through the political establishment.
That's right.
But he got elected because he spoke to the heart of what this country's about, and he spoke to the hearts of the people. Freedom and liberty. And what you just shared there, government's not the solution, but government's the problem. So we use our freedom, and we expect the government to protect our freedom, but we use it to shape and to mold our society, to minister to people, to do what we're called to do. We all have a different calling in life. God calls us to different tasks. But that calling is only available, it's only possible for us to pursue that if we have maximum freedom. So government needs to be held in check. It needs to be tempered. It needs to be limited so that we can have maximum freedom.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to say these things because it's easy for us to sit back and just to enjoy pleasure, to sit in that couch and to let life pass us by. And I don't think that's what we're created for, Ty. We're created to get out there and get after it. We're created out there to develop our gifts and our talents, to pursue a calling, to provide for our families, to encourage and to engage our communities, to participate in our communities, to participate in our churches. These are great gifts that we're given, and I'm concerned today with all of the pleasures, with all the creature comforts, with all the distractions. Not just that train that we're hearing in the background, right?
That's right.
But I'm talking about all the screen time, the videos and the games and the phones, and we're distracted from important things.
Man, I went
life.
to a concert in Nashville last night, and I'd never seen anything like it. It was a musical concert. It was at a well-known venue down there, and the artist was just adamant, no phones, out. Probably for the purpose of filming and photo taking, but it was a distraction. I mean, it was like it was. I mean, the force was out, and I mean, it was refreshing. To not have all those screens out. You know, it's almost like I was back in 1982, 83 when we didn't have that kind of technology out there. You know, but it was nice to sit in a music venue and watch someone perform and not have all that stuff out there. And I went to a performance of my daughter several months ago, and we went up. I went up top to a balcony where and there was all these beautiful young ladies performing, and I looked down into the audience, and everybody was on a phone or a screen, and this performance was going on. I was like, what in the world, you know?
So they were there in
and
body?
don't get me wrong, I like my phone as much as anybody and depend on it. And we live in a different era, but boy, it's really refreshing to take a break from that screen time. You know, we're pelted with lots of information this time. This day and age, and some of it's good, some of it's crapola, and it's up to us, I guess, to kind of weed through all that.
And we need to be disciplined. We need to realize that, if we're at a concert or if we're with family, we need to put the phone away, turn it off, or leave it in the other room. We want to be present. We want to be fully engaged with those around us. If you're going to take the time to go to a concert, let's just be focused. And that's showing respect for the people around us and for the person that we're there for. So, and it's hard because our phones, boy, we can get lost in them. We can distract ourselves with them. And
boy, it was strictly enforced. I'd never seen anything like it. It was unreal because I think the artist there were certain things going around that previously they'd see it and they just stop. They're done.
So wait a minute. Did they have phone police there? Were there people going around like checking? Dude, you're on your phone.
They did. They had signs. I mean, it was. I'd never experienced anything like it at a show.
That's good.
It was unbelievable.
That's interesting. That says a lot about us as a society. But then it's good that somebody was, saying, "Y'all don't need your phones. Just let's focus. Realize why you're here. Let's focus on this."
And there was a point at the end where the artist pointed out in the crowd and yelled and said, "Hey, they got a phone. Get it off." Wow, it was unbelievable. I'm not going to say who it was because I don't want to take away. But it was. I thought it was great. I mean, it was a heck of a show too. But. Anyway, on the eve of our Independence Day, what a great conversation we've had this morning about these freedoms, these men that put themselves on the line and wrote a tremendous document that obviously was divine providence, was from a creator. Yeah. And so as we celebrate tomorrow, I hope you've enjoyed some of this conversation. It's very important for us to know our history. To look back and appreciate what's been given to us, not by these men, but by a creator. Amen.
Amen. Ty, I appreciate that. Thank God. Thank God for the freedoms that we have, for the country you live in. Don't take it for granted. Use your freedoms wisely. Realize that you're here for a certain time, that you're called to do certain things. Use those freedoms wisely. Engage in the process. Make a difference. Mold and shape our community. And be engaged. Read the Declaration of Independence, too. If you've not read it, I encourage you to get online, and you can find it very easily. Read the Declaration of Independence today and tomorrow, for that matter.
Go downtown at 10 o'clock, as several of our historical societies and folks are going to be down there reading our Declaration of Independence, rain or shine, down at Planters Pavilion there next to City Hall. Be a nice event.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you so much. And if you're interested, if you are curious about what we've discussed, be sure you check out CommonwealthPolicyCenter.org. Lots of great information out there, lots of information about candidates. And if you're interested in running and being a candidate at some point, they have a way to train you and to help you in that endeavor as well.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Check us out on the web, CommonwealthPolicyCenter.org. You can sign up there to get our e-letter update. Or contact me through that communication on our website as well, CommonwealthPolicyCenter.org.
Check them out on Facebook, and every morning at about 5:45, you can hear the Commonwealth Policy Minute here on WPKY Radio as well. Yeah. So, Richard Nelson is the director, and he would love to hear from you. Go check out their website again, CommonwealthPolicyCenter.org. He's here on the first Tuesday of every month, and July's over. We'll see you in August.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Always a great show.
Thank you. Have a great one.
You too. All right. We're 5 minutes past the hour. Thank you so much for for listening to Tiger Talk this morning. Our guest, Richard Nelson, Director of the Commonwealth Policy Center. He'll be back next month on the first Tuesday of the month. It's 9:05 for Richard Nelson. Ty Englebright, thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a terrific Tuesday. Thanks for listening.